Not in Sunday school. Okay, welcome. Today's passage is coming from Jesus' story. This is a parable that he gave on the street, and also specifically, he told this parable in a dinner table. As you read the Bible, you will see on many occasions Jesus asking people to follow me whenever he meets them. He asked Peter, a fisherman, to follow me. And he asked Matthew, who was sitting at the tax office, to follow me. And they all followed. Of course, there were those who refused in the Bible stories. And the one who asked Jesus, Lord, allow me to go first and bury my father. And he kind of refused Jesus' offer by saying, let me go bury my father. And Jesus said, let the dead bury their dead, and you follow me. Jesus does not accept refusal. He wants them to follow immediately when he asks them to follow me. And in the Bible, those who heard this request to follow Jesus are faced with a crossroad, a this or that situation, as we saw last Sunday. This moment of having to choose between God or the world, relying on God or my experience or wisdom in the world is called, we say, crisis of belief. Because this is a crisis you face if you are in faith with Jesus. There's no way you can avoid this situation. You will face a crisis of belief if you want to be a follower of Jesus. Of course, as we saw last week in the story of Lot, Abraham's nephew, God gives us a second chance. God does not give up on us, but He gives us a second chance. You will remember that angel of the Lord, grabbed Lot's hand and put him outside Sodom and the whole family. God gives us a second chance. But this does not solve the problem. It puts us in another crisis of belief situation. We know how the story continued. As the angel grabbed Lot's hand, put him outside the Sodom city, then there was another chance, another crisis of Lot to choose whether to run to the mountain or to look around and find a town to run to. But Lot chose the town to run to, not the mountain God commanded. But the fact is that there's no way to avoid this call to follow Jesus. We either follow or refuse. Sometimes we pray to God, God, do not put me in this situation that I have to choose you or the world. I don't want tension. I don't want to be in a situation that I make decision. But Jesus says there's no way avoid this situation. You got to go through this crisis of belief. Because God builds His people in the world through placing them in those crisis moments. So if you are in this situation, in a crisis situation, whether you have to choose God or the world, thank God because God put you in this situation to build you up. He doesn't want to just put you in there to torture you, but He wants to see how you respond, how you choose, and He wants to build you through that experience. He gives God's people the choice to follow God or the world. In the Bible, He called Noah among the people who disobey God. And He called Abraham out of Ur of the Chaldeans. He called Lot out of Sodom. He called Moses. He called King David. He called King Hezekiah and King Uzziah. And He called many other prophets from where they were living. They could have chosen to live the way they have lived. But all these people of God chose God. But the problem is that not everyone responds with belief in this moment of crisis. Not everyone responds with belief in this moments of crisis. Last week, we looked at the story of Lot. He was hesitant when God called him to get out. He was hesitant. And next thing God did, God took him by the hand and pulled whole family out. But even after, Lot was still hesitant. He was still undecided where to run. He got his clear calling from God to run to the mountain. But he was still hesitant do not want to follow God, and he looked around, he found the perfect town to run to, small and close enough to run. He still chose the worldly way of life, not what God commanded. So even after God gave him more chances, him and his whole family chose a way of the world rather than the way of God. So I said last week, the moments of crisis of belief, this crossroad moment requires our obedience and commitment. God puts us in many crisis moments where we had to choose God or the world. We have to obey and commit. God doesn't just put us into this moment to give us difficult time. He requires our commitment and obedience. Last week we looked at Lot from the Old Testament who made the foolish choice. And in today's New Testament passage, there are 3 people in Jesus' parable who made similar choice like Lot did in the Old Testament. Luke chapter 4 and specifically today's passage is part of a long conversation Jesus had when he was at the house of a Pharisee. One day he was invited by a religious leader's house in a dinner table. He was sitting with other people and enjoying dinner. And he used this opportunity to be a teaching moment. He was sitting at the dinner table and he thought to himself, I'll use this moment as a teaching moment to them because we're in the dinner table anyways. So he told the story of a banquet, story of a party, story of a dinner table. One day, a master, the rich man, throws a banquet and he invited the people. And to the invitees, he sends his servant to remind them. It's not first time he called people. It was his second time to send his servant to remind them. They were already invited, and now they are reminded by the servants to come to the party. But at that moment, they all start to decline the invitation, giving one excuse or another. When the master received the servant's report, he becomes angry because he's angry because he invited them already. Now he sends out his servant to remind them. Only now they're making excuses and saying they cannot come. They had many other chances to refuse if they really have this serious issue in their lives. But now they're making excuses. I bought land. I bought oxen. I just got married. I cannot come. So the master ordered that the places be filled with others. He lists the kind of people he wants to invite: the marginalized, the cripples, the poor, or anyone. There's only one criterion of these people. Master said, those who were not invited in the first place to fill the seats. Those who were not invited in the first place. So he's contrasting the first group who were invited, who bought land, who bought oxen, who got married. And the second group is the exact opposite of the first group. So Master is intentionally saying that you guys rejected my offer, and see what group of people I will raise and fill the seats. And these are the group of people who are exact opposite of you. Notice in verse 14 that the people who made excuses like buying land, buying oxen, and being newlyweds were those who had already been invited. The master wasn't just throwing a banquet on a whim and being angry at those who couldn't come. The host had already made the invitation earlier, and he prepared the banquet, and he was expecting them to come. And they both know the banquet will be there. And those invited knew the day and place. And the master had even sent a servant to remind, but only after the servant's visit did they refuse, each with their own reasons. So they took the master's invitation too lightly. They would consider the invitation as a matter of just refuse when the servant comes. Oh, I forgot about that, but I cannot come because of these reasons. So the owner tells them to fill the seats by inviting those who need a meal, the marginalized, the homeless and the poor, the crippled. These newcomers are the people, look at this contrast. These newcomers are people who cannot buy land. These newcomers are people who cannot buy oxen. Even this group are the people who cannot get married. Marginalized, homeless, and the poor and handicapped in society. So Master's intention is fill the seat with the people who are the exact opposite of those who were invited in the first place. Even so, there's still room, and the host tells the servant to bring in anyone off the street. And the story ends with a very clear statement from the Master. Verse 24, he says, "Not one of those who are invited will get a taste of my banquet." So he says that you have all this excuse to reject my offer, and now I decide to give this off banquet to the people who are not invited in the first place. Look at them. They are exact opposite of you. You had this excuse to buy a land, and these are the ones who cannot buy land. You have this excuse to get married. These are the people who cannot get married because of their life situation. You decline my offer because you bought oxen, and these are the people who couldn't even think of buying oxen. And Master is telling them, you did not decline my invitation because something happened to you. But you use what happened to you as an excuse to decline my invitation. So in a way, they already made a decision to reject not only the offer, but also the Master. That's why the Master was angry and furious because of the servant's report. We do that all the time. We make our life excuse and use it as an excuse not to respond to God. We have many excuses. We say, I don't have a choice in this situation. I have to do this. I have to be responsible to my family. I have to raise my kids. I have work to do. I have to be successful in the world. I don't have time. I'm tired. I can't do it. Many things. But if you listen very carefully, these are often not inevitables, meaning they have other choices to make. But they made the choice already and used their life circumstances as an excuse not to respond to God. We have already set our lives in a certain direction, and we have decided to go that way, and then we use an excuse that we have no choice, like buying house, oxen, and getting married. Mark invited us yesterday to his proposal party. And imagine, I don't want to go. And on our way, my kids were crying and fighting in the back. And I just on the way, text him, Mark, I cannot make it because our kids being very cranky. It's not that I cannot go there because of my kids. It is that I already made my decision and make them as an excuse. In Jesus' day, as it is today, buying land, buying oxen, and getting married were probably the biggest event that could happen to anyone. Land, oxen, and marriage represent the essentials of life, the big things we cannot help but do. So as you read this passage, you might think that the Master is angry. Master is angry only because people did not go to the banquet because of these essential things in life. So you may think that Master's anger is unjust. He cannot be angry simply because people cannot come to the party when they have all these essentials in their lives. However, the anger of the Master was because the people made the deliberate choice not to go. Because the invitation was already made, but now they reject not only the banquet, but also the master. Sure, you can buy lands, you can buy oxen, you can get married in life, but these people use these things as reasons to reject the master. They didn't make life adjustment in their lives. When Jesus calls you, our job is to make life adjustment to follow Jesus. But we just don't want to make life adjustment because we know the cost of this adjustment. So we try to avoid it. We give all these excuses not to follow Jesus. And the conclusion of this parable comes in the verses that immediately follows the parable. So until verse 25, it's a parable Jesus told in the table. Until 24. Is it 24? Let's see. The parable is until verse 24. And then starting from 25, here's another story happening a few days later. So Jesus already told this parable in a dinner table. And a few days later, Jesus was with other disciples and he was saying, oh, by the way, and he was referring to the parable he told a few days ago. And he gave this conclusion in verse 27. He says, and whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. So he told this parable a few days before. Now he tells them the conclusion of the story. He says, you should carry your cross and follow me. And you should deny your life and follow me. If you do not give up on all these life essential things, you cannot follow me. He even says, hating your parents, your spouse, your sibling, and even your lives. And Jesus is telling that without making your life serious adjustment, you cannot be my followers. And he said, to follow me, be my disciples, even to be a Christian, we must live according to not the way we have been living. We have to make serious life adjustment to follow Jesus. Because his call is too heavy. We cannot just live the way as we have been living and follow Jesus. There's got to be some adjustment in our lives. Adjustment. It could mean both small and big. From small, maybe quitting your old bad habit, or putting yourself in different relationship, or even changing your career, as big as that. However it may be, the point is Jesus calls us to adjust our lives when he calls. We should acknowledge, we should agree that we cannot be his disciple without adjusting our lives. So what are the things we learn from this passage? First, you can't be a disciple without life adjustment. You can't be a disciple without life adjustment. You got to make decision. You got to adjust your life when God calls you. People in the Bible, they made some very important adjustment in their lives. Abraham left the place he had lived his entire life. Noah started building the ark. Seemingly very foolish thing to do. Peter abandoned his boat and his parents. And Paul reversed his direction of his life. Could Abraham have served God while living in Ur of the Chaldeans? By our standard, we want to say yes. He could serve God while living in Chaldeans. He doesn't have to leave. He could have just gotten along with his neighbors and worshiped God, adjusting nothing. But we know from the Bible story, in order to fulfill God's promise to make a great nation and blessing to the nations, there's no way Abraham could have served God while living in Ur of the Chaldeans. He had to leave the land in order to fulfill God's promise. Then could Noah have served God by hanging out with his friends without building the ark, without making his life adjustment? Could Peter have been a disciple while still catching fish? Neither of these men could have followed God without making major adjustment in their lives. Because the weight of what God is asking of us is so great that we cannot serve God without changing our priorities, without adjusting our lives. But we want to do both without adjusting. We want to serve God and we want to love the world too. And we say, I will serve you, Lord, but I'll try to squeeze in some other stuff too in my pocket. But soon you will know that you are like a child who puts his hand in a jar full of sweets and grab chocolate, try to get it out. But you can't because the jar is too narrow. You have to let go of the world to serve God. God places us in a crossroad and asks, you cannot serve both the world and me. In the Old Testament, the prophet Elijah asked the Israelites, how long will you hesitate? He was talking to the people who were hesitating between serving Baal or God. And he says, how long will you hesitate? Choose God. He rebukes the people for not deciding whom to serve between God and idols. People were standing in the crossroad and Elijah saying to them, choose God. Do not hesitate. Make your life adjustment. Much before Elijah, we know Joshua. Joshua tells the people entering the promised land, he told the people, choose whom you will serve. Same question. Choose whom you will serve. By our standard, it would be nice to do both. Choose God and choose our idols too. But now we know we cannot. We cannot serve two masters. Because not only is God our master, but the things of this world inherently try to be our masters. They're not satisfied to be a servant seat in our life. Things of this world they compete with God to be our masters. So we cannot live our lives serving two masters. So if you want God to do something amazing in your life, if you want Him to do great things that is beyond your capacity, I want you to say, I want God to adjust my life. I want God to adjust my life. From this parable, Jesus is telling us, you cannot serve me, you cannot follow me without adjusting your life. He calls us to adjust your life. And second thing we learn from this parable is that this adjustment is more serious than you think. This adjustment is more serious than you think. Oh, you say, oh, I can make my life, I can change my life a little bit. I can make small changes. Of course, those are really precious and important things. Many Christians want only very small adjustment in their lives. One thing I made my life adjustment in the month of August. I did my meditation, I did my QT before, but it wasn't very regular. The places and the time were very irregular. Sometimes I did it in the morning, sometimes I did it in the night and on the way or walking and running. And the locations is like sometimes outside the park. It was very random. And then one day I sat down, I prayed to God, I'll do it in the same place and same time with the same setting. I want to give this time to you. And in beginning of August 1st, I started doing the QT, the same place and same time, the same setting. This is a little adjustment I made in my life. We want and try to make adjustment like doing QT I did and reading one more chapter in the Bible or praying a little more, a few more minutes. Of course, these are all meaningful and in the long run, these are the things we need. So I encourage you to do that. But in this parable, look at the list of the things He just tells us to give up. He doesn't say your 5 minutes. He doesn't say He doesn't say small things. He says parents, wife, brothers, sisters, and even your life. These are all important, essential things in life. He tells us to give up on these important things. And this list of the things reminds me of land, oxen, and marriage in the previous parable. So he told this parable a few days before, and now he's telling it. Your parents, your wife, your brothers and sisters and wife. Reminds them the land, oxen, and marriage. The point is that we cannot follow God without obeying and committing, without giving up the essentials, without giving up the indispensables, and without giving up even the things that we think are most important in our lives. God says your life adjustment is more serious than you think. And God is calling you to make that adjustment. Hope Church values testimonies highly. Maybe all of you had given testimony in the church. And since Mark proposed Kayla yesterday, and Kayla is taking Living Life now, then maybe in the fall she will give testimony too. As we know, the key to testimony is not preaching, but sharing what has changed in your life. Life adjustment. What change had happened in your life? What adjustment did you make for God? So all these testimonies are talking about something that is adjusted in their life. It is good to hear someone else's life adjustment. But we don't want that life adjustment in our lives because we know that it is painful. We know that it requires a lot. It costs expensive. So we just love to be blessed through hearing the testimonies, but not giving my testimony, not telling what happened in our lives, what life adjustment we made because of God. But God does not give up on the people of faith. He keeps giving us opportunities, even if it means grabbing Lot's hand and dropping him outside the city. And that opportunity, one-time opportunity, doesn't solve a problem. He doesn't drag Lot outside Sodom to solve every issue. He dragged him outside the city to give another chance to choose between God and the world, by putting him on a crossroad once again. God gave Jonah a second chance, even if it means letting the disobedient Jonah be eaten by a fish and being thrown back out on the ground. Jesus came to Peter after he denied and went back to fishing. Jesus didn't give up on him, but he asked, "Do you love me?" and giving him another chance. He keeps giving us another chance, but not to solve all the issues, but putting us another crossroad to choose God. God wants to build us as people of faith and as a community of faith. He wants to do things in our lives that only God can do. But if we have hesitated like Lot, if we have refused and run away like Jonah, if we have denied like Peter, we must know that God is giving us another chance by putting us into this crisis of belief moment. He will grab us by hand and put us outside the city. He will throw us in the fish. He will come to the place where we ran away and ask us hard question to choose Him. And in that moment, we must make our life adjustment. And think about what are the things that stand between you and God. What are your land? What are your oxen? What are your marriage? What are your parents? What are your children? What are your priority in life? And Jesus says that without giving up on them, you cannot be my disciples. Without even hating them, you cannot be my disciple. Do I hate my wife? No. I love them. No, not them. I love her. I love my children. I love my parents. But the point is, do I love them more than I love God? Did I put them between me and God? And Jesus says that, love me first. To the extent that you're hating them, love me first. And He says clearly, you cannot be my disciples without giving up on them, without taking up your cross and follow me. So I pray that we remember that we have another chance, and it is an opportunity for adjustment in life. We have to make life adjustment. As I read verses 26, 27, and verse 33, as I finish my sermon, as I read these 3 verses, I want you to reflect on why we have refused God's invitation. What excuses did we use to refuse His invitation? What are the things stand between us and God? In what area should I make my life priority straight? What has become my idol? What has become my Lord and Master? As I read, think about those things, and we pray together. Pray for God's discernment to show these things and to reveal where we are standing in this journey. Verse 26, Jesus says, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." 27, he says, "And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple." In the same way,